Yeah, let's do this. So, really excited to chat with you guys today. I should mention I am the founder of the Starters, and today is all about figuring out how to leverage freelancers for your ecom business. I have a fundamental belief, and that belief is that freelancers are highly, highly, highly underutilized, especially in today's day and age. Think about it. We have so many headwinds in ecom, as Shim was mentioning. We have rising costs of ads, increased competition, decreased margins due to inflationary pressures, higher cost to borrow, interest rates are up. And with all these headwinds, ecom brands have to find leverage somewhere. Like it's been tougher than ever. And that leverage is in your operating expenses and OpEx. You have AI, you have offshore talent, making it incredibly cheap and more affordable to run your business on a day-to-day basis. Whereas before you'd have to hire full-time employees or agencies for everything. But what you lack there is strategic expertise. And that's where I think freelancers can really come in and add value to your business. So I'm excited to chat with you guys about the best way to do that. There are five key things we want to cover today. One is I actually believe there's a right time and place for all hiring models, freelancers, agencies, and full-time employees. So we'll cover all of those. We'll cover the different types of freelancers, doers versus managers versus coaches, and when you can use each of those. We'll cover how to find freelancers. Obviously, I'm biased. I think you should find freelancers on the Starters, but I'll cover all the ways in which you can do it. I'll tell you exactly how I found the first 50 freelancers for the Starters myself. And then you can decide what the best fit is for you. I'll tell you how to vet freelancers. I have a few questions and a few things that I like to cover when I vet freelancers as a part of our process on the Starters and whenever I hire somebody. And then I'll go over some compensation data that we have on freelancer compensation specifically for US based freelancers. So you can know what to expect and potentially pay highly strategic folks in the space. But before I get into all of that, I want to talk about my background. And I prepared this like little slide with the timeline that's very fancy, but I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about a quick story and why this matters so much to me. In 2020, I think someone, Ed, could you go on mute, please? Thank you. And on your end, I'm getting a lot of background feedback.
On it.
Thank you. Perfect. So in 2020, I joined a company called Wink. It was a wine subscription business as head of retention. This was during the pandemic when they were acquiring customers like crazy because everybody was at home. They wanted wine delivered to them, but it was a leaky bucket. They weren't able to retain customers that well. So I went in, helped solve some of the retention problems, eventually made my way to VP of growth. And in January of 2022 was promoted to CMO. We had recently also gone public at the time. And so I found myself on top of the world. I was 26 years old. I was a CMO of a publicly traded company. And the business unit that I was running, the e-com business, was incredibly profitable, growing. It was fantastic. But not everything was great. And things started to come crashing down slowly after that. In addition to e-commerce, we were trying to do wholesale, build our own brands, do celebrity partnerships, buy other companies. And as a whole, we were incredibly unprofitable as a business. Over the years, we had relied on our ability to continuously raise venture capital. But in public markets, once they crashed, our stock crashed 95%. We could not raise any more money. We were losing money. And so I had to go through 4 rounds of layoffs of my team, cutting them by more than 50%. All the people that I had hired over the last several years that had grown to be my friends. And that was a very, very difficult time. And that was when I first started looking at how we can build teams more sustainably for e-commerce. I looked at the freelancer space because I needed a way to keep the wheels turning on the business on a bare bones budget. I knew I wasn't going to go to Upwork and Fiverr because I tried to use them in the past for personal companies that I tried to start, just had really bad experiences. Not to say that there isn't great talent there. I personally had bad experiences though. So then I went to a staffing agency, a popular one in the space, which I won't name, but I hired a paid media lead and they were charging me $150 an hour for that freelancer. And I thought that was steep. I thought that was pricey, but I'm like, you know what? If this person is super experienced, it's probably worth it. A couple weeks in, I realized they were actually incredibly junior, had less than 3 years of experience. So I asked them to their face, how can you charge $150 an hour and not know these basic things about media buying or analytics? And they looked at me and said, I actually only make $60 an hour. And I was like, wait a second, where's the other $90 an hour going? it was going to the staffing agency. So they had nearly tripled that person's rate and was making the delta in commissions. That was the moment that I decided, hey, maybe I can do something better in the space because most e-commerce brands cannot afford to pay a 200% markup for talent. So in January of 23, I left Wink to launch the starters, where we focus on helping ecom brands find the best freelance talent without any markups, commissions, or recruiting fees. In August of 23, I actually took over a brand and replaced all of their agencies only with freelancers from the starters, and I still operate that brand today. So putting my money where my mouth is. And just last month, I'm excited to say we crossed 2,000 brand freelancer relationships facilitated through the platform, which I'm really excited about. But all of this to say is that I love the freelancer space. I've been in it for a little bit, and I've seen a lot of the good, a lot of the bad in the space. And that's really where my experience is coming from. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to skip this ad read because Shin already talked about it. But if you guys are interested in using the starters, have a code limited for this community to get $100 off your first month. So let's talk about freelancers versus agencies versus employees. I do think that there are pros and cons to each. So I'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about the questions that you should be asking yourself when deciding which one to hire. So freelancers, obviously they're going to be the most affordable. You can hire them part-time. They typically charge an hourly or retainer basis. They offer a ton of flexibility. You can change hours around, you can add, remove, you can flex up, flex down whenever you want. And you can find highly specialized experts who have spent their entire career doing some small little thing like paid media for e-commerce apparel brands. The bad is that freelancers do require a little bit more management time than, say, an agency. They can be hard to vet, especially if you don't have internal expertise. And that resource, because they are a freelancer, could be working with other brands and could have competing priorities. Agencies, on the other hand, obviously offer full service offerings. You can find an agency that does literally everything out there. They offer some flexibility. Maybe they'll hold you to a 3 or 6 month contract, sometimes a 12-month contract. I wouldn't sign that if I were you, but there is some flexibility there. And there are obviously a lot of agencies to choose from. But their entire business model is based on marking up talent rates. So they can be expensive. They can be hard to vet. A lot of the times when you bring on an agency, you're not actually interviewing or talking to the person that's going to be working on your account. So you got to be careful in terms of vetting. And if you're outsourcing an entire function to an agency, it can be hard to build those capabilities internally. So I wouldn't do that for something that's incredibly strategic for you. And employees, of course, fully dedicated resource. You build a capability internally, but it's very expensive. And it's very much a long-term commitment because hiring and firing constantly takes a large toll on businesses. So more importantly, what are the questions that you should be asking yourself when deciding which one to hire for different needs? So I have this thing that I call the hiring model test. It's a fancy name, but it's actually very simple. 3 questions you should be asking yourself. Am I hiring for a need that is core to our business strategy? Do I have the bandwidth to fully manage a freelance resource, or do I need a more robust full service solution? And can I afford a full-time hire? If my revenue were cut in half, could I still afford that full-time hire? And based on your answers to those questions, you'll find the answer. So for the first one, am I hiring for a need that is core to our business strategy? If yes, then maybe don't hire an agency. You want to build that capability internally. You can skip to question 3 to decide if you can afford a full-time employee or hire a freelancer. If you're not hiring for a need that's core to your business strategy, then you definitely don't want to hire a full-time person, right? So go to question 2, determine agency versus freelancer. Question 2, that's do I have the bandwidth to manage a freelance resource, or do I need a more robust full service solution? Typically, and this is typical, now there are always exceptions to the rules, freelancers are going to be a little bit cheaper and more affordable for the same quality of talent, but they might require some more internal management time. Agencies might be more expensive for the same quality of talent because their entire model is marking up rates. But they typically come together with the full package with an account manager, and they're kind of managing the experts for you. So based on kind of where you're being pulled in and what's more important for you, you can decide freelancer versus agency. And if you're between a full-time hire agency, the question is really about or full-time hire and freelancer. The question is really about affordability, and not necessarily affordability today, What I learned from my experience at Wink is things can go really bad really quickly, and you have to account for that. So the question I would ask yourself is that if your revenue were cut in half overnight, could you still afford that full-time role? If yes, then go for it. It's strategic to your business and you can definitely afford it. Go for it. If not, you might want to consider hiring a freelancer. So before we go into freelancer use cases, I want to mention something. If you guys have any questions through this process on a particular section, just drop it in the chat. I'm happy to answer it. I want to make sure you don't lose that question. And if you are thinking about it, other people definitely are as well. So feel free to ask away in the chat. And we'll also have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end if you guys want. So, moving on to use cases for freelancers, there are really three use cases for freelancers. The one that's the most common is the doers. So, this is the most common use case for hiring freelancers. These are the people who are actually doing the work: media buyers, designers, Shopify developers, etc. Maybe it's a one-time project, maybe it's on an ongoing basis. And you were actually like, you have options here. You can either hire somebody that's US based, they've worked with some of the best brands, they're going to be more expensive but more strategic if you don't already have that capability. Or you could go the low cost offshore route if you have that capability built internally and you just need somebody that you could train, but you can still keep your costs low. Second is strategists and managers. So this would be like your fractional CMOs, creative directors, stuff like that. This one, I would say proceed with caution. There are great fractional CMOs and folks like that out there, but sometimes the incentive structures aren't aligned and they can be very expensive. These people can cost 5, 10, 15, sometimes even $20,000 a month, for example, to be a fractional CMO. But if their incentives are not aligned, like a full-time employee's is, say with stock options, to the success of your business, then it could be a very, very expensive mistake, right? They could be more incentivized to keep their job than they're to actually help you perform. So when you try to help hire for this type of role, try to make sure your incentives are aligned. Maybe tie a lot of the compensation to results, whether that's revenue, profitability, or something of that nature when you're hiring for this type of role. You want to make sure your incentives are aligned because you're spending a lot of money on this role and you want to make sure they're the right fit and they actually care about your business. And then the third, and this, in my opinion, is the most underutilized form of freelancer hiring is coaches. Bring in experts, pay them for calls, pay them for their time, for their strategic expertise, not to do the work for you, but for their strategic expertise. I mean, why not? They've been there, they've done that, they've faced all the problems that you are about to face. Bring them in maybe an hour a week, an hour a month with you or people on your team to build up your internal capabilities and learn from their mistakes. But you guys can still do the work yourself. This is an incredibly affordable way to work with freelancers without having to break the bank and without sacrificing quality of talent. I highly recommend all new e-com founders under $1 million run the business yourself and leverage coaches for every possible marketing channel and thing that you're doing in your particular area of expertise. They're incredibly, incredibly valuable. So the rest of this presentation, as I talk about finding, vetting, paying freelancers, I'm going to be talking about the strategic kind of half of the doers. I'm going to be talking about strategists and managers. I'm talking about coaches. We're not going to really address the like low cost offshore talent today. That's not my area of expertise. They definitely play a role in an organization, but that's going to be our focus for the rest of today's conversation. So let's talk about finding freelancers. I actually think this is like the magic question that everybody attends this type of webinar for. How do I find freelancers? And I've been through it. I found 450 freelancers we have active today on the starters. And so the way in which you can find freelancers, personal networking communities like the limited supply Slack, LinkedIn and job boards, freelancer marketplaces, and staffing agencies. They all have their pros and cons. I actually think number one is the only one that should be a part of every freelancer hiring process. Use your personal network and use the communities that you're a part of. They're usually the best option because they're free, but be careful, don't trust blindly. LinkedIn and job boards, I actually think LinkedIn is utilized the wrong way when it comes to finding talent. People just post a job, let applicants come in, but I don't think that's the right way to do LinkedIn. You can do that, but I'll show you another way. And then freelancer marketplaces and staffing agencies. Obviously, mass freelancer marketplaces like Upwork and Fiverr. you want to watch out for quality. And on staffing agencies, you want to figure out what the fees are that have been that they're charging you. So let's deep dive on each of them. So the first one, personal networking communities, social media platforms like X and LinkedIn. People post all the time, "Hey, I'm looking for XYZ role. Anybody a good fit for this? Shoot me a DM." Online communities, we have the jobs and talent channel in the limited supply community. I see people looking for talent all the time. I always want to reply, find them on the starters, but no promotion. Shan, I got you. In-person events, one of my favorites, Commerce Roundtable in San Diego, Grow New York, Grow LA, and then leveraging your personal Rolodex. You can find great people using all of these levers. As I mentioned, they're free to source. You have great social proof, especially online if multiple people are vouching for the same person. And if, for example, in your personal Rolodex, somebody's referring you a media buyer, a creative strategist, or a copywriter, they probably worked with that person. And so you have a higher chance of that engagement actually being successful. Things to watch out for. So limited candidate pool. So as I mentioned, this should be a lever that you use, but you're not going to see all of the candidates here. Not everyone in the e-com space, maybe you're new to the space, you don't have the right community or network. And the biggest thing, don't let a personal relationship or trusted referral get in the way of a robust vetting process. I see this all the time. I've been victim to it myself because somebody that I respect made a recommendation to me. I'm just going to hire that person. No. Go through the vetting process that I'll share with you in a few slides. You definitely want to make sure that, the referral is helpful to get the intro, but you want to go through your own vetting process. LinkedIn and job boards. So as I mentioned, everyone knows how to use a job board. I'm not going to go too much in there. For onshore hiring, LinkedIn, Indeed, working networking is one, ZipRecruiter is another. We have our own at the starters for our members. For offshore hiring, you can use LinkedIn. You can use localized platforms. I actually found a full-time resource on onlinejobs.ph that works at the starters, which is awesome. I do think that there's a better way to use LinkedIn outside of just posting a job. So this is how I actually found the first 50 people to freelancers to launch the starters with. And I highly recommend doing this. So first, get LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's about $100 a month. And you can use their search criteria to find people who work at other e-commerce brands. You can even type the e-commerce brands that you want people from and then type in the role. And you'll get at least like 50 people in your search results. Reach out to some of them that seem to fit your criteria for what you're looking for with the personalized note. This is an example that I put together, but I'm currently running this business. Very impressed by your background. I think you'd add a lot of value to our team. Are you open to a chat to see if there's any possibilities to work together? A few people will respond and they will be a good fit. I was actually surprised. For the starters, the opt-in was over 50% from a cold email like this. I hopped on a call, and for those that it was a good fit, we moved to the interview process. For the interview process, and I'm going to go into detail about this later, but you want to ask detailed, personalized questions about things that are on their resume accomplishments to make sure that they're not BSing. So if they said that they increased revenue by 50%, you want to ask them how and ask them to get very specific. What channels did they use? What levers did they use? What role did they play versus other people? And the reason you ask that is you want to make sure that A, they actually were the one that did that, but B, they're also humble and they acknowledge the contributions of their team members as well, because that's what makes a good team player. And then secondly, when it comes to technical expertise, I like asking about trends on their specific function. Even if I don't know that function, I'll do a little bit of research. I'm like, what's a hot topic in this particular area? And I'll ask them about it. So if you're hiring an SEO manager, you can ask them about AI-driven content and how they think that impacts Google ranking strategy. The whole thesis here is that if you're hiring an expert in space, they should be passionate about that space, and they should be constantly researching and developing their ideas and opinions. They should have opinions about this sort of thing. So you're looking for an opinion, you're looking for acknowledgement of the other side of the argument and nuance of thought. But going on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, reaching out to people, even if they have a job, it doesn't matter. Just reach out to them if they're a good fit, I think is the best way to find talent. It's time consuming, and yes, they can be hard to vet, but in terms of finding quality people, it's the best way to do it. If you can set aside a day to do just this, I highly recommend it. And then the last piece that I'll talk about, and I'll mention it later as well, is your favorite candidates at the end of the interview, paid sample project all the time, no matter what the role is. Give them a paid sample project, say sub $300. It's an email designer that you're hiring, have them design one email. If it's a paid media buyer, have them do an audit. If it's a Shopify developer, give them a small task before hiring them as a retainer. And if you're not blown away by the quality of work from that small test task, then don't make the hire. This is the trial. If they're not blowing you away during the trial, they're not going to blow you away when they're actually working for you and have the job. And make sure it's paid, because I think we all know it's pretty unfair to ask people to do free work. So you want to pay them, show that you're going to be a good employer as well. So freelancer marketplaces and staffing agencies, and a lot of popular options. This is probably the area where I'm the most biased, but I've done my best to kind of give the pros and cons of each. I've also put some examples here. They're not the only players in the space, but within e-commerce, I've seen Upwork and Fiverr as a big category. Marketer Hire, a lot of people go to them. Store Tasker, a lot of people go to them. And then now the starters, of course, we see a lot of people come to us, and there are pros and cons to each. For Upwork and Fiverr, you have a large breadth of talent. They have low, very affordable pricing. You can see the entire marketplace, all the tens of millions of people in there, and their technology is best in class. Easy payments, escrow, messaging, all of that good stuff, video calls. It's fantastic. The cons is finding good talent could be like finding a needle in a haystack. There's a lot of spam, fake reviews, bots. You want to make sure, you're spending the right time to sort through all the noise. I personally had a lot of horror stories, but every once in a while when I have a very specific need, for example, I needed a trademark lawyer last year. I just bit the bullet and went through the process on Upwork and ended up finding somebody who was actually pretty good. So not to say that it's impossible. Marketer Hire is a popular staffing agency to help find marketers. They do have vetted, higher quality talent, and they have a lot of marketing roles covered. So no matter what you're looking for, they probably have a good fit for you. The cons, and I think I mentioned a little bit of this in my story at the beginning, is that the markups and fees can be very, very high and often opaque. You don't know how much you're actually paying talent versus them. And in a lot of cases, the markups can be 50%, 100% plus. So just be very careful in terms of what you're paying. And if you want to work with that person one-on-one or hire them full-time, what your buyout fees would be. They're typically $20,000 plus. You don't get full marketplace visibility. They typically do one-on-one intros, so you don't get to see all the options out there. And there's typically a monthly spend. The last time I checked their site, it was about $1,500 a month. So definitely not good if you're a business just starting out and can't necessarily afford that. Store Tasker is actually a platform I respect a lot in the space. I haven't used them personally before, but I know their team. They do have higher quality talent. And they focus on e-com, which is really important. If you're an e-com, you want platforms and people that focus on e-commerce. The cons are they do have some commissions and fees on an ongoing basis. And again, you don't get that full marketplace visibility. You get one-on-one intros instead of seeing who else is out there. And then finally, the starters. Obviously, my platform, we do focus on having the cream of the crop, the best talent, focus on e-commerce. All of our members get full marketplace visibility, and we add no commissions or markups on the freelancer engagements. There are downsides though. We do require an upfront membership fee to access the platform. That's to keep the quality of engagements and conversations very high. High intent brands, best freelancers, we do require brands to pay upfront to access the platform. And the membership fee is $295 a month. So if you have like a $200 project, then maybe it's not the best fit for you. Maybe you want to go somewhere else, because then the effective markup becomes very, very high. But these are some places you can go to. There are obviously others. I probably have 10, 15 more off the top of my head, but these are the ones that I've seen be the most popular, and all of them could be good for different types of roles. If you're looking for something very specific, maybe outside of core e-commerce functions, Upwork or Fiverr could be a place to go. If you're an enterprise company and don't care how much money you're spending, maybe Marketer Hire. If you need small Shopify development tasks, maybe Store Tasker. If you need a media buyer, creative director, or something like that on an ongoing basis, possibly the starters. Okay, so that was the entire section on finding freelancers. Let's talk about vetting. I just have, I believe, one slide for you, 5 categories in which you should be looking at when you're vetting freelancers. The first, technical skills. I mentioned some of the technical questions before this, but you want to use the interview to ask deep channel-specific questions Ask them about previous experiences, dig into their case studies. As I mentioned before, don't let them stay at a high level. You want them to get into the details and you want them to be able to explain it to you in a way that makes sense. Problem solving ability. So if anybody is a consultant or ex consultant or has ever interviewed for a consulting job, you're familiar with the concept of a case interview. I would case everyone that you bring on to your platform or to your business. Ask them a question about a problem you're currently solving. For example, your customer acquisition costs have been increasing for the last 2 years, and be like, how would you address this problem? And what you're looking for isn't necessarily the right answer. You're asked because they don't know your business very well. You're looking for them to ask the right clarifying questions. You're obviously giving them a very vague prompt. So you want them to ask good questions and you're looking for structure in their thought and responses. So CAC is going up. How are they breaking down that problem? Are they asking you, is it what media channels are you on? What's your spend per media channel? Is it going up in certain channels over others? Those are the questions and areas that you want to see them go down, not just, oh, you should improve your creative. Like that, you don't want them to go straight to the answer. You want to see their thought process. You want to see that they're thinking about it in a very structured way. And then communication and professionalism. This is, I posted about this on LinkedIn before. Some people have gotten, apparently this is a polarizing take, but I do think there are a lot of red flags that you can suss out early when looking at communication and professionalism. Are they responding to emails and interview requests in a timely manner? Are they taking 2 weeks to respond to an email? Maybe they're not as excited about your opportunity. When you interview them, are they in a professional setting? Is their camera on? Of course, there are edge cases for everything in personal situations, but generally, it's a good rule of thumb. Are they communicating clearly? Can you understand them? Are they articulate? Very, very important. At the starters, we do 1 through 3 for you. So I personally interview everyone that comes onto the platform. We do 1 to 3 for all of the talent that we bring on. But there are 2 additional steps that everyone should take. One is determining organizational fit. Are long-term expectations aligned? Do you enjoy talking to them? How about working hours, turnaround times, when you want to meet? Is all of that aligned with their schedule? And then, as I mentioned before, always do a paid sample project, no matter whether you're hiring from a highly vetted network of starters, from a personal referral, does not matter. Just do a paid sample project no matter what. Please don't skip this step. So that's vetting freelancers. I think we'll get this deck out to everyone. The recording is there, but I want to make sure that everyone gets this slide in particular. Stay on it for a second in case you want to take a screenshot. This 5-step process I've done with thousands and thousands of people. I've had the results of that from seeing our brand freelancer engagements. This is the process that you should follow when hiring freelancers. And then finally, compensation. So we actually publish annual freelancer compensation guide that takes into account all of the data on our platform from hundreds of freelancers, thousands of engagements, and hundreds of brands. This is what we're seeing, and this is primarily for US-based roles. By function, it's pretty much the same. In fact, technology is probably the cheapest, which is in stark contrast to several years ago where hiring a developer was much more expensive. But now the cost has come down significantly and hiring great marketers and creatives is actually more expensive on an hourly rate basis. Seniority for a C-suite executive, like a true C-suite executive, you can expect to pay about $160 an hour. For directors and VPs, $140 an hour. This is why I mentioned they're great for coaches. They might get very expensive as strategist or a manager on your team. But as a coach, it's an absolute steal. And individual contributors is about that $90 an hour mark. We have the full breakdown by role, supply and demand, all of that. Just go to hirethestarters.com/guide. You can get the full guide. It has everything I know about freelancer compensation and how much you should be paying freelancers. And then finally, I want to leave you guys before our Q&A with 6 of my biggest tips and learnings. Some of this I've already shared, but I'm sharing for a 3rd or 4th time just because I feel like it is so incredibly important. You're probably tired of hearing this, but do paid sample projects. I cannot stress that enough. I've purposely put it in here like 4 or 5 times because it is the most important thing you can do when hiring. Aligning on long-term expectations in advance, especially with the freelancer. For example, if you want to convert them to full-time in a few months, maybe have that conversation up front. Are they open to a full-time opportunity if it's a good mutual fit? Make sure that your long-term expectations are aligned. Next one, work asynchronously as much as possible. Freelancers are freelancers for a reason. They like owning their own schedule. They do not like recurring meetings, and they probably have multiple clients. To the extent possible, leverage Loom, leverage Slack, and work asynchronously. I actually don't really have standing meetings with any of the freelancers that I work with. We try to do everything via Loom and only use meetings for strategic conversations. Avoid surprise builds. So we actually have this in our contract template. But if you're working with somebody on an hourly basis, put a cap on the number of hours they can bill in a particular time period. So you don't get surprised when you thought a project would take 5 hours when it actually took them 50. So you want to make sure you put a cap on contract. I've seen way too many times before we were doing contracts on the starters that people not align on this before. The brand would think something would take 5 hours. The freelancer took 15 hours, and now they're at a stand up in terms of how much should you actually be paying. So try to align on that upfront to avoid surprise bills. And on the flip side of that, pay well and on time. I almost never negotiate a freelancer down in terms of rate. I tell them what I'm looking for. I ask them what it would cost for them to do a great job and for them to think that they have conviction in doing a great job. And I can either afford it or I can't. And if I can't, instead of trying to negotiate it down, I'll ask them if a reduced scope is potentially in question to get it down to a budget that I can afford. But typically, when you squeeze freelancers on price, you're going to pay for it on the quality side. They're just going to spend less time doing what they're doing for you to get it done, to get paid, but they're really not going to give their best work. So I would try not to negotiate with them. And a little hack that I have to become a freelancer's favorite client, as soon as you get the invoice, just pay. Like as soon as I get a notification, I pay it within minutes. Freelancers stress about two things. One is finding work, and two is getting paid. If you can take that stress away from that, you're going to become one of their favorite clients very, very quickly. And then finally, this applies to anybody that you hire, freelancer, full-time agency. But I think it's important because people really don't think about it as much for freelancers, but provide timely and honest feedback. If you're not liking results, if you're not liking deliverables, if you feel like they're not where you want them to be, you need to provide that feedback up front. A lot of the times I see people continue on with the same freelancer without giving feedback that they're secretly not very happy with the work. And they end up just letting them go after a few months. But in most of those cases, you have the possibility of actually working that out if you provide that feedback. So something to remember when you're working with freelancers as well as full-time employees. Okay. Well, wow, there's 29 of you. I appreciate you guys sitting here listening to me talk for the last 40 minutes. I wanted to give a little bit of time for any questions. I know I shared a lot of content. It's probably a lot to digest. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions. We can open up mics for everybody, make this conversational if you guys want. But in terms of actual content, that's all I had for you. So I appreciate it. All right. It looks like we have two questions. The first one, my brand is an Amazon only brand, but looking into expanding to full stack e-commerce. Many areas to focus on: rebranding, identity building, photo shoots, etc. Once that is over, building the website and everything else that comes after the launch, where to start, freelancers agency, how to buy tasks. Okay. So it depends on a couple of things. It looks like you still have, Michael, you're having issues with figuring out, when to hire for what, where do you start? So when starting an e-commerce business, I actually have a full slide on this. So Michael, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll send this to you of exactly how much you should be paying when you're starting an e-commerce business for various roles. But essentially, you want to look at the website development, how you want to build that. You want to look at the design, and you want to look at creative and branding for your brand. It looks like you already have the creative and branding piece down. So on the website development front, you either want to build from an existing Shopify theme and hire an e-commerce manager to just configure it for you, or you can go custom, but I just don't recommend that for anybody just starting off because a custom build is incredibly expensive. You could end up spending a lot of money on it. I actually found the slide that I was talking about, so I'm just going to share it for everybody to see here. So, Michael, this is what I was referring to. I literally just tweeted about this. So, cost to scale a brand from 0 to 1 million. Upfront cost of this is building the website and brand. Ecom manager to configure a theme. Maybe you need a developer to do some small things on that theme. CRM marketer to set up all of your email flows, because the difference between Amazon and owned e-commerce is that on owned e-commerce, you get their email so you can follow up with them for repeat purchase. You probably don't need the creative director because you probably already have a brand put together. And then on an ongoing basis, this is what I recommend. You can definitely do it for less than $5,000 a month, to be clear, if you as the founder are willing to take on a lot of the work yourself and leverage people like paid social experts as coaches instead of doers. Going back to the freelancer text I was talking about. But this is generally what you should expect it to cost for hiring freelancers for all of these things. I would definitely stay within this range. Definitely don't go more than this range, especially because you're just starting out on owned e-commerce. Might take a little bit more time to find the right fit who's willing to do less hours for you. But this is generally what I would charge or what I would expect to pay. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Jack has a question. I'm pre-launch and looking for help building my Shopify site. I need a developer and UI UX designer. I'm looking for ongoing relationships. Definitely looking for doers, not coaches. Is the starters a good fit? Yes. Let's email. I'll give you a platform overview, but actually for the sanity of the entire group, maybe we can just do it live. Yeah. So I essentially had a starter that I had build a site for me on Shopify, and I literally just went back to them yesterday for something that I needed. So this is what the platform looks like. This actually answers the next question: are you able to filter by level of experience? So this is what the platform looks like for our brands. You can filter by particular roles. So in your case, UI UX designer and Shopify developer. So I'm going to filter by those. You'll see all the options you have available to you. You can go into their specific profile and learn a little bit more about them. A lot of them have, their various services and rates, a link to their portfolio, bio, skills, tools, industry experience, case studies. You mentioned wanting like the ongoing relationship. Like I have an ongoing relationship with the Shopify developer in here. I literally just emailed him last night. Hey, I need help launching 2 new projects. It's not rendering as expected. Can you help? He responded 3 minutes later. I sent him a loom and he's working on it. So absolutely. Grace, to answer your question, in the starters, are you able to filter by level of experience? Like if we needed 1 to 3 years of experience versus 5 to 10? No, you cannot, because I think, and this is really a perspective that I have on hiring talent, it is less about the years of experience and more about how good they actually are. So filtering by years of experience is not a filter, but you can filter by seniority. So for example, if you're looking for an executive level marketer, you're going to look for a CMO. If you're going to look for a mid-level marketer, maybe director VP, director of growth. Or if you're looking for somebody who's an executor, then we have the growth marketer category who's more individual contributor level. So you can kind of do it, but not exactly in terms of years of experience. Because like I mentioned, I'm biased. I was a CMO at 26. I feel like it was not based off of years of experience, but based off of results. So we don't have the ability to filter by years of experience on the platform itself. But thank you for your question. You also mentioned, where would you recommend finding those kinds of freelancers with 1 to 3 years of experience? It is a filter on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So if you remember what I mentioned, you can go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, pay $99 a month, search for a lot of the top brands you're looking for, search for the role that you're looking for, and filter by 1 to 3 years of experience. You should be able to find a lot of folks in there. Ben, based on your experience, how important is it for freelancers to have some genuine, authentic interest in your brand? I think it is somewhat important, and that's a little bit of a non-answer. I think it matters more the more seniority, the higher level that you're hiring for. If you're hiring for a fractional CMO, creative director, you want them to have authentic interest in your brand, because the stakes are so much higher and they're more likely to do good work for something that they're interested in. For something, like a media buyer or something like that, they don't need to have authentic. I personally don't think they need to have authentic interest. They just need to be really good at their job and see if that actually comes through in their paid sample work. If they blow it out of the park, great. maybe authentic interest is, a driver of them doing great work or not. For some it is, for some it isn't, but I would really just rely on the paid sample project for that. And maybe start to consider that the higher up you go and the more of a time commitment you're asking for somebody like a fractional CMO. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Awesome. Those are all the questions in the chat right now. I'll give it a final minute to see if anything else comes through in the meantime. Hopefully, this was helpful for you guys. I'm available on X and LinkedIn. My X handle is at Dolwani, LinkedIn Dolwani. Feel free to shoot me a note if you have any questions about hiring, about freelancers, about the starters. I love, hopping on with early stage brands and helping them work through the process, whether or not you're a member of the starters. So definitely feel free to hit me up, and I appreciate you guys joining this call. Shin, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Uh, Not really. Yeah, everything's awesome. I might have some things to say, but I'm blank right now. Just go to me, have fun. If you ever need anything, intros, fundraising, an intro with Jay, or anything, just shoot me a DM and I'll help you guys out on anything that you need. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'll upload this. There's gonna be a recording in the next 24 hours on YouTube. I'll send that to the channel also. I'll post it on X and I'll make sure that everybody knows that this happened.
Awesome. Thank you so much for putting this together, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Guys, take care.
Bye, everyone.